Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to It Pays to Be Polarizing. I'm your host, John, aka JB3, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about my brain injury. This one is a little bit deeper, I guess, a little more dark, because brain injuries can be a little bit dark, unfortunately. I will say in my case, one of the things that happened during my first week of my stay at the hospital, or the rehab, because I've been transferred at this point. I apologize for not getting to you last week or at the beginning of this week with a new episode about that, but that was part of it. I was transferred from UMass Medical to a place called New England Rehab up in Woburn, Mass, which had a brain injury unit. I was expected to be there for however long it was going to take me to get situated into a normal routine, and then most likely be transferred to a long-term care facility where I would spend the rest of my days. That was the plan. That was all because when I woke up, no short-term memory of anything. Literally, as I said, I would turn side to side and somebody new came in the room every time. I also had no use of my right side, and that was one of those things they didn't know if I'd get back. So it was a little bit troubling and concerning for those involved in my case as to what I was going to actually get back for use of everything, including speech, memory, and ability to use my right side. Kind of crazy looking back on it now, as it's, I would say, 85% recovered. My memory, not so much. My memory will always be the worst part, but that's something I've come to deal with, live with, as a person who's a survivor of a brain injury. So, my first week at the rehab, I will tell you that I didn't really want to be there. I didn't know where I was. My family had moved me to a location that was about 50 miles away from where I lived and where I worked. There was a good reason behind this, because I wasn't getting any rest while at the hospital, because too many people that worked there knew me and knew where I was, and there wasn't really a problem getting into my room to visit me, which should have been a problem. My family was trying to do the right thing by me, what they felt was the right thing, by allowing people to come in and visit. The problem with that was, from my understanding, was that I wasn't really in a place where when I was talking, especially with people I knew around, I was very open in my communication. I would say some things that were inappropriate as well. And I would swear a lot, something I don't like to do. So they're concerned that people that I worked with would have a problem with that, and it would change the way they looked at me, which is a bigger problem, of course. So they decided that the best thing to do was to move me to that New England Rehab. But also, from my understanding, was that while I was in the hospital, the first hospital at UMass, I never once lost control of my situation with anyone I was talking to, aside from family members. If someone came in the room, I would have a great conversation with them. I would then say, "Thanks for coming," and off they would go. And as soon as the door closed, I would tell anyone that was in the room exactly what I thought about that person, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They knew more about those people than everyone that worked with them at the hospital. I will say that for sure. That was because of my role at the hospital is very much right in front, right in the public, every day, talking to anybody from a janitor or a food service prep worker, all the way up to the chancellor of the hospital and medical school. So I had connections all around, and I had conversations all around. But the one thing about that, like I said, I was told I never slipped throughout the time that the conversations were had, even though my family was very worried about that. So the day of my transfer, on the 17th, it was St. Patrick's Day, I got an MRI in the morning, and then was put in an ambulance to be taken to New England Rehab, where I was totally right side limited. And by limited, I mean I had no use of my right side at that point yet. So I got there, and my first couple of days, I think my rehab was in my room that I had, like my occupational therapy, my physical therapy, all to see what my potential was and what could be done next. And the problem with my injury, and I say the problem because there were many problems with my injury, one of them being me, but the problem with my injury was that I was aware, which most people who receive my injury, they aren't aware of what they can't do. And I was very aware. So every therapy I had, I get very frustrated because I couldn't do things I knew I should be able to do because there were things I could do before. So that was a problem. So I started to fall into a depression. And this part of it I remember because there are parts of the stay in the hospital that I do remember. Most of it I don't, which I feel pretty blessed for, and also not all that happy about at the same time because I would like to know. But I do remember the parts where I was extremely depressed. And I was really hoping that I could literally fall out of bed while I was sleeping and hit my head and just have it end that way. Couldn't do it myself, of course, but if I fell out of bed because I couldn't roll over and couldn't do those things, that would have been great because it just would have been done for everyone involved. They wouldn't have to worry about me anymore. They wouldn't have to worry about where I was going to live, what I was going to do, how long I was going to be at that hospital, how long I was going to be in rehab altogether. If I was going to live with a family member at a point in time, who knew? I didn't want anybody to worry about that. And it was hard for me to realize that I couldn't walk. I had trouble talking. I had trouble with little symptoms and syndromes, such as Wernicke's, where I would talk like Yoda on occasion. You think you know, do you? Things like that. I would talk out of sync, speaking to sentences like that, and if you were me, I would think something, and that's how I talk sometimes. That's a problem for me, and I was aware I was talking like that. As soon as I did it, I knew I was shaking my head. I was getting upset because it was something that was not me. I'm a person who can speak. Now I can speak quickly. I have trouble speaking slowly. It's something I have to monitor all the time to slow my pace of speech down because of my injury. It's an automatic, just pick up the pace and keep rolling, like I'm a freight train rolling downhill with no brakes. And it can be a problem sometimes because there are times I can't understand myself. And people look at me trying to figure out what I've said, and they'll say, what? And I'll repeat it, and I'll still be speaking just as quickly because I haven't found out that I'm speaking so quickly. And then I have to monitor myself again because now they're saying, what? What? Can you repeat that? I don't understand. And that's a problem to me because I realize that they don't realize because they don't know about my brain injury. And that's fine. I don't expect them to. I don't expect them to educate everyone about it because not everyone needs to know. But everyone knows at least a little bit that I've had concussions. That's what they know. Some know the significance of them. Some know that this was the worst. And it's part of who I am. Whether people will tell me to get over it, which was said to me in the rehab facility, big problem for me. Don't ever use that statement to me about something that I'm having trouble with when it comes to memory-wise, when it comes to something I was supposed to do, because you and I will be done at that point in time. So if you're looking to not talk to me, use that phrase. That'll happen most assuredly and most readily. So I will tell you that there were nights where I didn't sleep. I was on pretty much an elephant tranquilizer because I was not sleeping. I was in a manic state, so to speak, of alertness and awareness of being awake at times. And so they would give me a major dose of a sedative to help me sleep. And the problem with that was it was taking away from my therapies during the day because I was in a cloud. My whole brain was in a cloud till 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I couldn't even think. I was trying to do physical activities in physical therapy. I was trying to do brain activities in occupational therapy and coordination activities. Through recreational therapies, I was trying to do things there and trying to get some use back of my side because I was an athlete of sorts, I would say, beforehand. And it just was one of those things I wanted to get back to. The one thing I did every day before my accident was I was doing 400 push-ups a day and 400 sit-ups a day, just because. I was doing 200 every morning, 200 every night, 200 of each, just because I wanted to stay in shape. I was playing hockey at that time, 2 to 3 nights a week, and it was just part of me. And the accident came, it was all gone, because I could never play hockey again. I could never do the exercise again without the right side because I couldn't do push-ups, and that was a big problem to me. So it became depressing for me. And it was one of those that I had to come to grips with at one point and figure out what was going to work for me, and if my inner drive was going to set me apart and set me down a path that would help me, or if it was going to send me on a path that would be detrimental to my health. Now, I was having a conversation this morning at my gym with one of the coaches there, and I said, with me, it's a problem for me because I'm never satisfied. People tell me I'm doing great. People say, they can't believe how far I've come. It's not far enough for me, and that was 27 years ago. You'd think I'd cut myself some slack, but no, that's not my style, and it probably never will be. So the depression was one of those that was real. It was hard every day to try and get up, go through life, go through a day without knowing if I would ever get used to my right side back, if I would ever speak a normal sentence again, if I would ever be able to slow my pace of speech down so that people could understand me, and if I would ever walk again. I think that was the hardest, not knowing if I would get out of that wheelchair that they wheeled me down to therapy with every day. I look back at those days and the things I remember. I remember the one thing about brain injury, besides depression that can happen, it becomes a thing that you can either see it, feel it, or not. It just pops up out of nowhere. I always know when March 9th is, whether I know it or not. Something happens that just says, okay, it's March 9th. It's the same as October 23rd. I know what day that is every year without ever knowing it's even that day. I'll wake up that morning and know that that's the day I lost my mom. And that's always been a thing for me. So there's depression that just sets in out of nowhere for no particular reason. But on those 2 days, it's always just an odd feeling. Not necessarily depression to start, but there's always a part of that I go through for the next week or so, especially with the March 9th, because I start rehashing without even knowing it in my brain everything that went on for those next 10 to 15 days. And then for the following weeks to come, I have those small memories. But other things that happen with a brain injury is that some tendencies can become very exacerbated. A great therapy term, by the way. Just means exaggerated, means you're doing it more than you did before. More highlighted, more whatever they want to call it. And for me, it was the caretaker role. I had a roommate that I remember. Now I remember him because he was one of those that he was always talkative around me. And he helped me for some reason. He knew when I was hitting my depression modes and he would start to talk to me. Now he talked to nobody. If there was a nurse in the room, he didn't talk. If his family was in the room, he didn't talk. If I was alone in the room with him, he would talk. And he had a very guttural voice because he had had 2 major strokes in about 72 hours and was in the hospital trying to figure out where they were going to send him next. And I remember the one day when we had a next door neighbor who had also received a brain injury, who was in the hospital, and his was from a very foolish mistake in a car accident. So remember this because it made an impact. He was surfing on the hood of a car on Route 1 in Saugus, and the person at the brakes. They were both drunk. Person at the brakes, and he went off the hood and on his head. When he woke up, he was totally waist down, paralyzed, and the thing that got exacerbated with him was aggression, and he was a very aggressive individual from the next room over. And every time he came near either myself or Arnold, who was my roommate, and I'll leave it at Arnold, he would be very, very aggressive, like he was going to hit one of us. And I kept having to call the nurses to have him removed from the room. And finally they removed him, and just they wound up having to take away his chair unless he was going to therapy. If he was in his room, he was in that bed and he was not getting out. The wheelchair was nowhere near him because he had gotten so aggressive in my room with my 80-something-year-old roommate at the time. So he gave me something to kind of fight for in a way. He made me start to think how many things I would have to do to protect this person, to be a caretaker for Arnold. Because Arnold was a great guy. But like I said, the funny thing with him was he wouldn't talk unless it was just to me. So a funny story about him was this. I was coming back from therapy, and the 2 therapists were talking about how they were going to get him to talk because they were having such difficulty with him. And they didn't understand why he couldn't talk, because he really should be able to at this point. And I kind of said, he can talk. And they said, no, he can't. I said, yes, he can. And so I said, do me a favor. At the end of the day, when you bring him back to my room, leave and just wait outside the door. He'll start talking as soon as he thinks you're gone. And they said, he can't do that. I said, he can do that. Trust me, this is what he can do. So yes, I ratted out my next door neighbor, but it was for the good of him, to be able to get out of the hospital and get back to his family. And they wheeled me in, got me into my bed, walked out of the room, and within 2 minutes, he starts saying my name. He had a very guttural voice, and I could imitate him, but I really don't want to do that. I kind of do, but I don't. He was just funny because he would go, and I'm going to do it because I just can't help myself. He would go, John, John. And I'd say, yes, Arnold, what's going on? He goes, I need water, or something along those lines. He'd tell me what he needed. And I remember this because it was funny to me. It was one of those, I couldn't believe he wouldn't talk with anybody else in the room, yet he'd talk to me. And so they heard him from outside, and they came around the corner, and they both said something along the lines of, Arnold, the gig is up. We now know that you can talk. And they said, we're going to start tomorrow morning and get you back on a great road to recovery. And they left the room. And his first words to me, I can't believe you told him, along those lines, something like that. And he, like I said, very guttural, very hard to speak voice. But he was a great person to have as a roommate because he motivated me to make sure that I was relaying my own information, yes, sometimes his, to the therapist that needed it. He helped me get through some really dark times because he just seemed to know when to start talking. So depression is a big part of brain injury, and it doesn't go away. You can fight it the way you want to. You see all these people with chronic CTE that wind up doing crazy things, and I know I'll never do that because I'm far too aware of all those things. So I'm not worried about that ever happening with me. But I can see that with people who aren't aware of their surroundings, of their injury, of the concussions they've had, of the damage it's done, because they think it's normal, and it's not. I have a good friend who has a brain injury, and his has changed him to the fact that we no longer speak, because he has changed so dramatically and has just gotten people out of his life by things he's said, things he's done, behaviors, all those things. I would love to say he's still my friend, and if he needed me, I still would be his friend. I would be there for whatever help he needed. But otherwise, I can't have him in my life because he's just too destructive to himself and to others around him. So that's part of brain injury too, things you don't see, because it's an invisible injury, so to speak. It really is. And brain injury is one of those that, be glad you can't see it. Be glad you can't be inside my head for any given time, because as your brain may go at a million miles an hour, mine goes at a million miles a second. It's constantly processing information. It's processing information that prevents my depression, that prevents my being impulsive, that prevents my just doing stupid things. And at times, it has a hiccup, and I do stupid things, or I do something impulsive. Depression will never get the best of me. That's the one thing I will not allow it to happen. And I will just continue to fight that until I can't fight it anymore. And that will probably continue for the rest of my life. But that was my first 8 or so days in the hospital, was just trying to figure out what to do with that depression, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, trying to figure out if I was getting anything back. And this was all while having very little memory, no use of my right side, and an inability to sleep. So that's it for Brain Injury Part 3. I'll be having Part 4 shortly. I'll try and be more regular about it, and I'll have a couple others up there as well on other topics. Anyway, if you like this, please subscribe, please like, comment if you would as well. I know this one was a little bit longer, but I'd love to have some comments, and I will be going live one of these days just to have a conversation with anybody who wants to join. All right? Thank you for joining It Pays to Be Polarizing, and have a great day.